Well, it finally happened. Notre Dame went 10 days without a single transfer portal commitment and then landed 4 in one day. Today, we're breaking down why this wasn't just a good day for the Irish, but a potential turning point for the entire offseason. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? Welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. I am thrilled to have you here with me on Tuesday, January 13th, and thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or follow the show on your favorite podcast platform so that way you don't miss an episode, especially this time of year when we got all kinds of crazy news and updates every single day during the transfer portal window. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, today's show is going to be a lot of fun. And it's been a while since we could say that. Like, we've certainly had fun on this show, right? We're trying to have a good time here. But there have not been that many fun things to talk about with Notre Dame this offseason. But that changes today because Notre Dame finally broke through in the transfer portal with 4 commitments in one day, and I expect more good news in the very near future. We're going to start by taking a look at the secondary additions, and I'm going to break down why the additions of Jayden Sanders and McKinney could give Notre Dame the best defensive back room in the entire country. Then we're going to do a deep dive into wide receiver Quincy Porter and defensive end Keon Keeley, who I believe could be the 2 most important upside plays of this entire cycle. And finally, we're going to close it out with the latest on defensive tackle Francis Brewu, all the wild twists and turns of the Mylan Graham recruitment, and why the Marcus Freeman situation is officially over and honestly never should have been a story in the first place. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today. Let's roll. I want to start by talking about Jayden Sanders, the cornerback out of Michigan. He was the last player to commit to the Irish on Monday, and he's the most intriguing one out of all of them, in my opinion. So Sanders only played 1 season at Michigan, and he appeared in all 13 games as a true freshman, plus 2 starts as he filled in due to injury. He has 3 years of eligibility remaining, and his commitment is proof that the University of Notre Dame has made adjustments to make it easier for undergraduate transfers to be admitted to the school. During the early days of the transfer portal window, that was a big issue for Notre Dame, and they could basically only take grad transfers. But over time, things have changed, and Jayden Sanders is proof of that. Sanders is 6'1". He's 193 pounds out of Kilgore, Texas, and he was a 4-star recruit out of high school in the class of 2025. But On3 has him as the 12th ranked cornerback in the transfer portal. And there were whispers of a mystery player that Notre Dame was in the mix for, and it turned out to be Jayden Sanders. I had not heard of Jayden Sanders' name as a potential target in the transfer portal until Monday morning. And then by that point, it looked like Notre Dame had already had him locked up. So that's a testament to the way that this coaching staff has gone about their business. They've tried to be very discreet, which has sometimes made it difficult for me to talk about things on the show when they were trying to keep everything under wraps. But there's obviously reasons for that. And now they have Jayden Sanders in the fold. I didn't think cornerback was a big need for the Irish going into this cycle other than nickel. Obviously, we've talked about that at length. But when you can add a player like Sanders with 3 years of eligibility and an experienced veteran like McKinney, who we're going to get to here coming up, you have to take advantage of that situation because these are 2 very talented players. And Notre Dame is expected to return their entire starting secondary except Devontae Smith at nickel. I assumed they'd be happy to roll with Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary as the backups because they both showed a lot of potential as true freshmen, and they also have 5-star cornerback Kerry Adams coming in, plus 4-star Chaz Smith, and potentially Aiden Pouncey if they decide to play Pouncey at corner instead of safety. So they are very deep in terms of talent, but not necessarily experience once you get to the backups and even at the third string, especially now that Carson Hobbs and Chance Tucker just left via the transfer portal, as well as freshman Cree Thomas, who ended up at Colorado. So in a way, it's like a 1-for-1 trade between Cree Thomas and McKinney. But you also have to consider the fact that Notre Dame is probably going to lose Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, McKinney, and maybe even Tay Johnson after next season if Tay Johnson has a breakout season and he ends up going to the NFL early. So It might be a surprise on the surface that Notre Dame would go after another young defensive back, but it makes sense when you think about it long term. And Sanders played 303 snaps as a true freshman at Michigan this past season, 90% of which were on the outside. He's a solid tackler. He finished the season with 23 total tackles and had a missed tackle rate of just 10%, according to Pro Football Focus. And that's really impressive for a true freshman defensive back. On the season, Sanders allowed 16 catches for 132 yards on 23 targets and also had a pass breakup. Michigan runs a lot more zone coverage than Notre Dame, but I think he's going to be able to catch up quickly in man coverage after working with Mike Mickens. And if Sanders' goal is to get on the field as fast as possible, his best shot is probably at nickel. He hasn't played that position much before, but Notre Dame is definitely going to give him a look because there is a need at that position. And if Sanders ends up showing potential, he could spend the entire offseason training there and put himself in line to start. Obviously, Dallas Golden is going to have a say in the matter as well, considering he filled in for Devontae Smith admirably last season once he made the switch. And it's even more impressive when you consider the fact that Notre Dame didn't even train Golden at nickel at all in the preseason and only moved him there once they realized that Hobbs wasn't up for it anymore and Devontae Smith couldn't do it. So that's where they made him play during last season, but I'm not sure if that's where they want him long term. We're going to have to wait and see there. It's possible that they make Sanders train at nickel with Zachary at boundary and then Golden at the field spot. But either way, the trio of Sanders, Zachary, and Golden in the sophomore class has enormous potential, and Sanders was a high-quality addition by Notre Dame, even if he doesn't make an immediate impact in 2026. And then they added DJ McKinney, the cornerback out of Colorado and also Oklahoma State. He's another intriguing prospect who brings a ton of experience. And now that he's in the fold, I think it's safe to say Notre Dame has the best secondary in the entire country. They are just so loaded at cornerback and safety. But for McKinney, he spent his first 2 seasons at Oklahoma State before transferring to Colorado, where he spent the last 2 seasons. He's a grad transfer with just 1 year of eligibility left. He's 6'2", 180 pounds, and like Jayden Sanders, McKinney is from Texas. On Friday, On3 reported that McKinney had signed with the Irish before. That status was rescinded about, I want to say it was like 15 minutes later. It happened really quickly. But even then, it felt like he was always going to end up in the class. McKinney was actually in South Bend for his visit when that news broke. So the writing was kind of on the wall that a commitment probably took place, but then on Monday it became official, and McKinney was the first member to announce in Notre Dame's 2026 portal class. McKinney also visited Ohio State and Texas Tech, so this was a big win for Notre Dame, even if it didn't have quite the same fanfare in the lead up to the announcement. McKinney has played a ton of college football in his career, logging over 2,000 career snaps already. He redshirted in 2022 at Oklahoma State, but appeared in every game the following season, and he was a pretty productive player before he ended up transferring to Colorado. He has started the last 23 games of his career, although he did miss the final 3 games of 2025 due to an injury, but I think he's going to be ready to go for spring practice. Over the past 2 seasons, McKinney racked up 97 total tackles, 14 pass breakups, 4 tackles for loss, 4 picks, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So the stats are great. And going into the 2025 season, Dane Brugler, the NFL draft expert at The Athletic, actually had McKinney as the 3rd highest ranked cornerback on his big board. His former coach, Deion Sanders, said, quote, "I think this guy has all the qualifications to be a first-round pick, a high first-round pick," end quote. Obviously, McKinney's stock has fallen a little bit in terms of the NFL draft, or else he'd be in the NFL draft. But despite a dip in his performance last season, McKinney brings a wealth of experience, and I'm confident he'll look a lot better when he's surrounded by great players in the secondary like Leonard Moore, Adon Schuler, and Tay Johnson. If you are a cornerback on a bad team, and Colorado was a really, really bad team last season, you're going to get exposed sometimes. So I don't care how good you are. That was the case with McKinney, and I think he has a much better shot at having a big year now that he's with Notre Dame. He's got to improve as a tackler, especially if Notre Dame wants to try him at nickel, but he's very good in man coverage, which is a staple of the Notre Dame defense. Between Sanders and McKinney, I think Sanders is more likely to end up at nickel, but they're going to give McKinney a look. I would very much expect that to happen, but considering McKinney has already played 4 years of college football on the outside, I'm not sure it makes sense to move him to nickel, whereas Sanders has a lot more runway. He's only been in college for 1 year. He has 3 more years left. But then you could counter that argument by saying, well, McKinney is the most experienced. That transition should be a little bit easier for him because he's played so much football. I could see it going either way. I'm just making a prediction today as we sit here in early January that Sanders has a better chance to be nickel, but if McKinney can make that transition and he can get out there, and then you have a starting five in the secondary with Moore, McKinney, Gray, Schuler, and Johnson, those are five really talented players who are also very experienced now. But I'm really interested to see what this move means for Christian Gray, because I get the sense that the Notre Dame coaching staff is much higher on Christian Gray than the fan base. But now that you have a player like McKinney, you can rotate him more if you want McKinney to end up playing at the field corner spot. Last year, Notre Dame did not trust any of their backups to come in for Gray, even when he was playing hurt early in the season, like he was against Texas A&M, or just when he was struggling mightily like he was against USC. You think that they would have more trust in Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary with a full year under their belt, but now you have a player who's already proven he can play at a high level. You could make the case that Notre Dame's lack of depth in the secondary is part of the reason why they lost to Texas A&M in week 2, because Devontae Smith was out of that game with an injury, and Moore and Gray were both playing through pain. Notre Dame saw that, and they made sure to fix it in the transfer portal, and that's exactly what they did. So you have all these guys back there. Leonard Moore, who's going to be a first-round pick, and then you've got Christian Gray, who's going to be a 3-year starter. DJ McKinney, who's played a ton of football at a high level, and if he cleans up some of the mistakes he made last year, he could end up being a high NFL draft pick. Adon Schuler and Tate Johnson at safety. Nickel is a question mark, but those are 5 really talented players. And then behind them, you've got Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary, who showed immense potential last year, plus Luke Talich and either 5-star freshman Joey O'Brien or Ethan Long, maybe even Aiden Pouncey. And by the way, you've also got 5-star cornerback Kerry Adams coming in, Chad Smith, and Nick Reddish. That is an absolutely loaded position room. There are Power 4 teams out there who would gladly take Notre Dame's second-team secondary. That's how good this unit is. So I don't really understand how teams are supposed to complete a pass on this unit. They are going to be so fun to watch, and the additions of Sanders and McKinney just take them to a whole nother level. So the secondary additions were impressive, but Notre Dame did not stop there. Coming up next, I'm going to explain why Quincy Porter and Keon Keeley could have the highest ceiling of any portal additions in the entire cycle. Stay with us. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It's the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. The new year is here, and it is the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It is a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work-from-home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. I picked up new bedding from Wayfair recently, and it completely changed how my bedroom feels. It's cleaner and looks more put together. I love that I could find pieces that matched my style without spending a fortune. Shopping is easy, delivery is smooth, and everything arrives exactly as expected. It honestly made getting back into a routine this year feel a lot more manageable. Get organized, refresh, and back on track this year for way less. Head to Wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Today, we're breaking down all 4 of Notre Dame's commitments in the transfer portal that they secured on Monday. And then we're also going to get into the ones who might be on the way soon. But former Ohio State wide receiver Quincy Porter is the most high-profile addition Notre Dame has made in the transfer portal to date in terms of his high school recruiting ranking. But to me, he's more of a developmental player who could turn into an absolute superstar down the road. Porter was the number 5 wide receiver and the number 23 player overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite in the class of 2025. So his upside is through the roof. He has got the perfect body type for a boundary receiver. He's 6'4", 210 pounds with an 80-inch wingspan. It's insane. Plus, he has 4 years of eligibility remaining after redshirting his freshman year. Yet again, another example of Notre Dame taking an undergraduate transfer. Porter finished his freshman year at Ohio State with 4 catches for 59 yards, but he did not play after Ohio State's win over UCLA in mid-November, and he was ruled out for the Cotton Bowl. There are some lingering concerns about the injury he suffered this past year. There are some people who believe that he needs, or maybe he's already had knee surgery, which is obviously a concern, and it could limit his availability in the spring. Ohio State is notoriously discreet when it comes to sharing details about injuries, so I tried to ask around. I talked to Jay Stevens, who's the host of Locked On Buckeyes. He didn't really know the full extent of the injury, so that's going to be something to monitor in the future. Notre Dame's top target at boundary wide receiver going into the portal was Nick Marsh from Michigan State, but once they missed on him and he picked Indiana, Notre Dame was forced to expand their search. And the staff quickly identified Porter as a high-ceiling player who could step in and compete immediately if he's healthy. Notre Dame already has 2 starters locked in at wide receiver. Jordan Faison is going to be the field receiver, and Jaden Greathouse is in the slot. But they're looking for someone to replace Malachi Fields at boundary, and they're only bringing back Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams at the position, 2 players who have potential, but they just haven't really produced in college yet. Plus, they do have early enrollee Keon Finley coming in. But Porter gives them something they didn't have, which is just a physically dominant boundary prototype. Notre Dame moved quickly on Porter once he became available last week, and they were able to beat out Michigan, UCLA, LSU, Oklahoma, and others for his services. Let's dive into the scouting report. He has outstanding size and length. He's a jump ball specialist. He knows how to separate at the catch point and win through contact. For his size, he's also very physical, so he's a matchup nightmare for a smaller corner. His ball skills are excellent, and his catch radius allows quarterbacks to just trust him to throw it up, even when he's covered. Like, if you're near the red zone, you should just be able to throw the ball high to Quincy Porter, and odds are he's going to be able to come down with it with his 80-inch wingspan. Plus, he's 6'4", so that doesn't hurt either. He's not the best route runner, so that is something he's going to have to continue to work on. I think part of it just has to do with for his entire life, all he's had to do is just run straight down the field, and he was so much faster than everyone around him and just so much bigger and stronger, so he could run the deep ball. The quarterback would just have to throw it up, and he'd come down and make a play. But then obviously once you get in college, the competition gets a lot stiffer, so he has some work to do as a route runner. He's a little bit slow getting in and out of breaks, but he's got such long strides that once he gets to his top gear, there's no catching him. Honestly, for me, the biggest concern I have about him right now is his health. I don't really know the full extent of the situation. And look, maybe I'm making too much of this, but I just think it's interesting how he missed a few games. There's all kinds of differing reports about the extent of his injury. And then he did say at Cotton Bowl Media Day that he was going to be fine. But look, guys lie about their own injuries all the time. Time will tell how serious this really is. But I'm also a little bit skeptical about his ability to come in and be a big-time contributor immediately. Like, he's definitely going to be in the mix to compete with Micah Gilbert for the starting boundary receiver job, but he's still got a lot of room to grow. The good thing is Notre Dame doesn't need him to be a finished product right away, but they do need someone who can win one-on-one on the outside, especially in big moments, and Porter can absolutely do that. With his size, his length, and his ball skills, Porter gives Notre Dame something that they're going to miss with Fields gone. The upside here is significant. With multiple years of eligibility remaining and all the physical traits you could possibly ask for in a boundary wide receiver, Porter has a real chance to develop into a legitimate NFL caliber #1 receiver if everything clicks. That's why he was a top 5 wide receiver coming out of high school. That's why he was a top 30 player overall in the country. So health is probably going to determine how big of an impact he makes in 2026, but this was absolutely a smart addition for Notre Dame, and it could pay off in a big way down the road. Like, I could see a situation where at the end of next season, Porter makes a solid impact to the team, has a couple touchdowns, makes some big plays here and there, but we'll really see him take off in like 2027. And at that point, he could be the #1 wide receiver. And with all of his athleticism and his physical traits, like, you can't teach that, right? So for Notre Dame to finally get a player like that in the room is a huge deal for Mike Brown in this Notre Dame offense. All right, next up, we got Keon Keeley, the defensive end from Alabama. To me, he's a buy low, high upside addition for Notre Dame's defensive line. The former 5-star desperately needed a fresh start, and now he's in a situation where the fit, coaching, and opportunity all make sense, and it should be able to get the best out of Keon Keeley. As we have talked about many times in the show, he was originally committed to Notre Dame coming out of high school before ultimately choosing the Crimson Tide. He's currently listed as 6'5", 280 pounds, with elite length and the physical tools that made him one of the top recruits in the country coming out of high school. I believe he finished as the #2 player overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite in the class of 2023. He was a big time player coming out of high school. But then he played in just 19 games during 3 seasons at Alabama, but in 2025, he appeared in all 13 games and finished with 16 tackles, plus 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, including a game-ending sack against South Carolina. His best performance of his entire collegiate career came on a really big stage when he recorded 4 tackles, a sack, and 2 quarterback hurries in Alabama's college football playoff win at Oklahoma. And I remember as I was watching him make plays in that game, and it was a game that I didn't even really want to watch in the first place because the sting of Notre Dame's playoff snub was still very real. But I was like, look, it's college football. It's a playoff. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to be miserable. And guess what? I was absolutely miserable during that game. And I was even more miserable when I started seeing Keon Keeley making plays because I was like, dude, are you kidding me? Is this really happening right now? Like, not only am I watching 2 teams who should not have even been in the playoff, but now I've got to see a former Notre Dame commit make plays on this stage. It was just awful. But hey, now he's not a former Notre Dame commit. He's a current Notre Dame commit. Keeley redshirted as a freshman in 2023, so he's going to have 2 seasons of eligibility remaining, and this is a reunion that's been years in the making. Keeley was once fully bought into Notre Dame, and everything that Marcus Freeman was building before his recruitment took a late turn. At the time, Keeley was sort of like the centerpiece of the class of 2023. He was the biggest name that Marcus Freeman had landed as the head coach at Notre Dame, and it felt like he was the future of this program. Like, that might seem hyperbolic today, but I remember doing the show when he was a commit, and that is how he was talked about. And he felt like a lock to sign on the dotted line with Notre Dame, but then former Alabama coach Nick Saban made landing Keeley a priority, and you started to notice some suspicious social media activity from Keeley. He was liking a lot of posts about Alabama back when you could still see who liked posts, and he was retweeting some things. And you're like, wait a second, are you committed to Alabama or Notre Dame? Well, that made the decommitment felt inevitable, and then he ended up committing to the Crimson Tide, but obviously his time there did not go as planned. On the Notre Dame side of things, they needed experience and upside on the edge after losing Josh Burnham to Indiana in the transfer portal, plus junior Tuialamaka and Jordan Botello are out of eligibility, and plus Keeley is very close with the Reeder family because they're from the same area. They both went to Berkeley Prep, so that connection is still strong and played a factor in landing Keeley out of the portal. So Keeley is going to be joining a program he's familiar with at a place where he's going to feel comfortable and he's going to have the resources he needs to maximize his final years at college. And I don't know if he really had those resources at Alabama. I don't think Alabama was willing to invest in him individually as much as Notre Dame will be. I'm not even sure if there were really any other serious contenders in this one. I think it was Notre Dame all the way for Keon Keeley. I'm not even sure if he took another visit anywhere else. So this was all about offering Keeley a clean slate and a plan to revitalize his career. Plus, the timing worked out perfectly with the arrival of Charlie Partridge from the Indianapolis Colts, who is one of the most respected defensive line developers in all of football. So let's get into the scouting report for Keeley. Well, he still definitely looks the part physically with rare size and power for an edge defender. He's got all the traits still, so I believe his ceiling is still high, even if the production hasn't matched the recruiting hype yet. It's just not as high of a ceiling as we thought it could be when he was being recruited out of high school. At Alabama, his transition from defensive end to a more hybrid role as an outside linebacker slowed down his development quite a bit. He bounced around positions a lot early in his career. Plus, he had to adjust his body type accordingly. Like, it's one thing to change your position. It's another to have to completely transform your body, weight, body fat, muscle, all of that. And that can be a lot, especially for a young player. And then doing that year after year, it's just not a great situation to be in. So he didn't play at all in 2023 when he redshirted, only registered 9 snaps in 2024 as a redshirt freshman. But then he finally began flashing a little bit more late in the season this past year, especially as a pass rusher. So he has experience lining up on the edge, and he also has a little bit of experience sliding inside, which adds versatility to Notre Dame's front. And with the issues they've had trying to secure defensive tackles, the fact that Keeley is able to move inside could be huge. To me, the biggest area improvement is consistency and just having that sense of urgency, snap to snap, to have a relentless motor is something you need to be a really high-end defensive lineman, especially at a place like Notre Dame. Keeley has not really shown that in college up to this point, but he can definitely change that in his final 2 years at Notre Dame. If Keeley goes all in on football, and he really dedicates himself to being the best football player he can possibly be, there is a chance he can finally live up to the all-world potential he once had. I personally believe that Keon is going to replace Josh Burnham as the backup to Bryce Young at strong side end. I don't expect him to be a starter unless maybe they decide to move him to 3 technique, but we know that Burnham really started to flash at the end of 2025 for Notre Dame. I just think that Keeley has a higher ceiling than Burnham. Plus, Keeley's been able to stay healthier, and he's more versatile because he's more suited to move inside when needed. So if Keeley can match Burnham's production and provide more than that, this is a huge win for Notre Dame in this cycle. They are probably going to have to reshape his body again, at least a little bit. I mean, he's listed at 282 right now, so I'm guessing they're probably going to want him to shed some weight in the next few months so that he can get back to a weight where he can be way more explosive like he was back in high school. So this is going to be a very important project for strength and conditioning coach Lauren Lando. If Lando can help get Keeley's body where it needs to be, and then Charlie Partridge can unlock even a portion of the player Keeley was projected to become, this could be the biggest win of the cycle for Notre Dame at a premium position. Or in the worst case, I think the floor is that he's just a decent backup, and that's still a win for the Irish because they needed depth on the outside. A lot of people have made this comparison already, but I feel it's appropriate to share on this show. If Keeley can provide what Javonte Jean-Baptiste was able to do for the Irish back in 2023, that would be massive because JJB was a really talented player at Ohio State who finally put it all together in his last season of college and was one of Notre Dame's best defensive players that season. Notre Dame doesn't need Keeley to be a superstar right away, but with 2 years left and elite physical traits still intact, Keeley has a real chance to turn his career around in South Bend and have a storybook ending to his career. So Notre Dame nailed the portal at multiple positions, but there's still one major piece that they're missing. Coming up, the latest on defensive tackle Francis Brewu, wide receiver Mylan Graham, and why even more good news could be coming soon. That's coming up next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever, but actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. I loved being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so I knew exactly what I was getting. The zone deal stood out too. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save even more. Knowing prices include all fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. We're back here on Locked On Irish. We've already broken down the 4 players who actually committed to Notre Dame, but there's a couple guys who Notre Dame has been after for a long time now, and I have a feeling they might end up in this class here very soon. Let's start by talking about defensive tackle Francis Brewu out of Pittsburgh. So as great as Monday was, and trust me, it was a lot of fun seeing Notre Dame reel in those 4 commitments after going through the first 10 days without one. The obvious elephant in the room is that none of those 4 guys play defensive tackle. But you may have noticed how Notre Dame orchestrated these announcements. The first one was DJ McKinney at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And then at 10:30, Quincy Porter, the wide receiver from Ohio State, made his announcement. And then at 11 a.m. Eastern, there was Keon Keeley. And it felt like someone was set to announce their commitment at 11:30, and then it just didn't happen. But then Jayden Sanders closed out the day with his commitment announcement at noon. So it makes you wonder, who was supposed to commit at 11:30. It also makes you wonder how Notre Dame has failed to land a defensive tackle, considering that is their biggest need in this cycle by far. They don't just need one starter, they really need 2 while they wait on the status of Jason Onye. And at this point, I just have a gut feeling that Jason Onye is not going to be approved for another year of eligibility, partially because of what happened with Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback at Ole Miss, but we're going to have to wait and see. But let's say Jason Onye is not in the fold. Notre Dame desperately needs help at defensive tackle. They've already hosted various defensive tackles so far during this transfer portal window, but they were not able to close on one for one reason or another. Francis Brewu, the former Pitt Panthers defensive tackle, was a must-get for the Irish from the moment he entered the portal, given his talent, production, the position he plays, and the connection to Charlie Partridge, who recruited him out of high school. Now, Partridge never actually coached him at Pitt because he recruited him, but then he bolted to the NFL to be the defensive line coach for the Indianapolis Colts for a couple years, but now he's back in college and has a chance to actually coach Francis Brewu. Once Brewu took a visit to Ohio State, it felt like everything was pointing toward Brewu becoming a Buckeye, especially considering he grew up in Columbus. I think he was born and raised literally 12 miles away from the campus. And look, as someone who grew up in Ohio, pretty much everyone in that state, if they're a college football fan, they're rooting for the Buckeyes. There's a few Notre Dame fans and a few Michigan fans, obviously, but if you're in Columbus, you're going to grow up a Buckeye fan. So I just assumed that Francis Brewu would end up at Ohio State. But then on Sunday, things started to turn because it seemed like Ohio State became more focused on the Alabama duo of James Smith and Quay Russaw. Notre Dame hosted that package deal. They are literally a package deal. Russaw, I think it's Russaw, either way. Ohio State hosted them last week. Notre Dame hosted them as well, but it never really felt like the Irish were serious contenders there. Plus, it seems like Notre Dame only wanted Smith, but these guys have been best friends since their freshman year of high school, and they were truly a package deal. And you know what? I respect that. If you want to hang out with your best friend and you get to play high school and college football with them, be my guest. But once it became clear that Ohio State was prioritizing the Bama duo, Notre Dame was right back in the mix for Brewu. Tennessee and Indiana were also involved, but considering Notre Dame's need of the position, they absolutely had to get this done. Brewu was a freshman All-American at Pitt last year. He's got 3 years of eligibility remaining and is exactly what this team needs in the portal. So when I went to bed last night, I felt good, not great, about Notre Dame's chances with Brewu. But as of this recording, which is 9:27 p.m. Pacific time on Monday night, I feel pretty great. I think they're going to be able to get this done, and I would not be surprised if we get an announcement later today. Not saying it's a done deal, but that's where I think things are trending. This recruitment has featured a lot of twists and turns, so nothing is a lock, but Notre Dame appears to be in a great position to land arguably the best player at their biggest position of need in the cycle. But hey, speaking of twists and turns, I cannot remember a recruitment that has had more of them than Notre Dame's pursuit of Mylan Graham. It kind of reminds me of Peyton Bowen back in the class of 2023. What a wild time that was. But this time last week, it felt like academics were going to get in the way of Graham potentially coming to Notre Dame. Then he took his visit to South Bend, and it felt like a commitment could be imminent. But then the next day, he took a visit to Auburn. Well, once he got back from Auburn, Notre Dame was considered the favorite, and on Saturday, Pete Nakos and Steve Wiltfong from On3 put in crystal ball predictions for Graham to end up at Notre Dame. And that usually means a commitment is already in the vast majority of the time. But when I woke up on Sunday, there appeared to be a change of heart regarding the academic situation and where Graham felt most comfortable. So I said on the show yesterday that it seemed like he was going to Ohio State, but I also said I was never going to say never with this one because it has been such a roller coaster already, and I know how badly Marcus Freeman wants to get Mylan Graham. He thinks incredibly highly of him, so Marcus Freeman has made him a big priority in this cycle. So was I surprised on Monday to hear that Notre Dame had regained all the momentum and was once again the favorite for Mylan Graham? No. But by that point, I had just kind of given up on trying to predict it, and I said I'd believe it when I see the announcement. So that is how I feel today. As of this recording, I feel confident that Mylan Graham is going to transfer to Notre Dame and become the second former Ohio State wide receiver in the class. But if you're not ready to believe that, considering how this is all played out, I do not blame you whatsoever. I almost don't even want to say it because I feel like I'm going to jinx it. So if Notre Dame is able to get this over the line and they're able to bring Graham into their wide receiver room, that would be such a massive get, because I think Graham is ready to make an immediate impact and have a breakout season in 2025. So we're going to see what happens today. I would not be surprised if there are more twists and turns in the recruitment of Mylan Graham, but I like their chances, and I feel like that's the best thing we can possibly say at this point. All right, on the way out, amid all the transfer portal craziness on Monday, we did get the news that Marcus Freeman will not be charged after being accused of battery following an incident at his son's high school wrestling match on January 3rd. The St. Joseph's County Prosecutor's Office made a statement on Monday and released a video of the incident, which confirmed everything we talked about on the show yesterday. Marcus Freeman did nothing wrong. Chris Flieger, the assistant wrestling coach at New Prairie High School, instigated the entire situation and then lied about it to the police. I would encourage you to read the full statement and watch the full video because it is honestly pretty ridiculous. There is arguably enough evidence for Flieger to be sued. It is that bad. And this was so clearly just all orchestrated so that he could get something out of it. I can't even imagine why he would ever think that this would work out in his favor, given the amount of people who were there to witness the whole thing, given the fact that it's such a high-profile person, you have to manage there's going to be some video evidence of what went down. And I just think he was trying to get some fame and notoriety out of the situation, or he's just an antagonizer and wanted to upset Freeman and his family. But instead, he just embarrassed himself on a national stage. So now it's safe to say we can put this behind us and never think about that guy again. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. As always, thank you so much for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on YouTube or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Like the video, rate and review the podcast. You know the drill, but it goes a long way in help growing the show. We did just pass 14,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, but now the chase to 15,000 is on, so please subscribe. And by the way, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. I'm going to be back here tomorrow, hopefully reacting to even more transfer portal commitments. I'll see you then.